Hello, everybody. Joe the Lawyer here, and another episode of Analog Man Cave. I'm talking about how to be an awesome GM because I'm writing a DM guide, a GM guide, I guess I have to call it, right? So I don't get attacked for copyright infringement. But yeah, so I'm going to write my own RPG, and as I write the book, the GM guide, I'm doing a section a day, and basically by the end of, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 months, I'll have the whole thing written. And as I go, I'm going to talk about each section that I've written about, so you guys get an idea, and it helps two birds with one stone, right? I get YouTube content and I get a book written. So the last one I talked about the first video and all the hats you're going to have to wear as a GM. This time I'm going to talk about all the types of games that you could run as a GM, all right? Because there's a lot of different things you could do. And each type of game, it's going to require different skills from you and a different mindset from you for both you and your players, really. I'm going to get into a lot of detail later on in the book and in this series of videos on how to design adventures and for all the different types of games I'm talking about below here. And I'm also going to talk about campaign design in a lot of detail later on. But for now, I'm just going to talk about the different types of games that you're going to be called on to run, okay? The first type is the most basic type. It's the one-shot. It's an adventure you put together for your players, or you pick up and buy somewhere or whatever. And it's not connected to a campaign or a setting or anything like that. It's what you run, when you have like a new group of players, or you have a pickup game, or you might be getting together with old friends or whatever, you used to play together in college or something like that, and you bust out the old books and want to run something. You could also run it if you have a group that, a regular group, but they get together infrequently, and neither you nor they want to invest all the time and energy into like a long campaign, because who remembers from a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, what the hell happened? You just want to get together, have fun, have a couple beers and bullshit, and have a good time. So these are the most common adventures sold today. They're short, they're sweet. There's no background, there's no backstory needed. They often come with pre-generated characters for the players to use, so you can skip all the dice rolling and just jump right in and play. Usually long enough to last 1 or 2 sessions, depending on how long you guys play. Many are published as zines, or you can pick them up in game stores or online. You can, drive through or something like that. There's tons of free ones out there as well. If you go like Dragon's Foot or something like, geez, just Google it. Quick web search, you're gonna find out that there's like an infinite amount of adventures. It's helpful to have one design for the game system you guys all know the rules for. But if you're playing in any old school game and a DM, if you're a decent DM, you can convert on the fly. I mean, but an orc is an orc is an orc, right? Unless you're playing 5th edition or something, then an orc is like God compared to a first edition orc or something like that. But generally speaking, you just convert on the fly. All right. The second type is a side quest, and I'd forgotten all about these. And I shot this outline over to Tim Shorts. He reminded me of a couple of these. The side quest, it's like a one-shot adventure that you run in the middle of a campaign. It's helpful to have these ready to go for any occasion, because what Tim doesn't what uses them for is, let's say we got 4 or 5 players in the group and 2 don't show that week, right? You can't do the thing that you're intending to do because it's the big bad guy, or it's a critical thing, or whatever it is. And so if you get 1 or 2 players who do show and everybody still wants to play, you just hand wave the continuity and you run the PCs through a one shot. It's a side quest. It's a little thing. It doesn't affect anything else. It's not related. It doesn't even have to be in the same area geographically. It's just a game they play, and they still get the XP, and everyone gets to have fun. All right, you just hand wave all the things that don't fit. You just the next time everybody shows up, a couple PCs to have a little more gold, treasure, magic items, and maybe some battle scars than the other PCs. That's all. All right, they're good to use too if you have a campaign, even if everybody shows. So for example, let's say your group loots the hell out of an old temple, and you can't sell the loot and buy the fancy armor, weapons, and whatnot because you're in a small village. So you got to head to the big city. So while you're in that big city, you have an adventure. Maybe you have a run-in like a thieves guild, or the old lady who owns the tavern you're staying in has a basement that's infested by pesky rats. And can you please help them out? And you look down, there's were rats, and it's a whole adventure, and yada yada. You get into the sewers or something, and so these side quests, they don't have to have a connection with anything else in the whole campaign unless you want them to. Like, for example, in the case with the old lady and the rats, maybe next time you go to town, you get to stay free for a week, or first beer's free, or you don't have to buy meals or something like that, right? So they can have as much or as little meaning to the overall campaign as you want them to have, really. The third type, it's the convention game. This is like a subset of the one shot, but with the caveat that it has to end within the time slot provided. Nobody wants to start a 300-room dungeon in a convention game and get 5 or 6, 7 rooms in and never get to the big boss fight, right? They require you as a GM to be flexible, change up on the fly. Don't have a big map, don't have a shit ton of encounters. Expand or contract the number of rooms or encounters as you go and as the players go. So they get the sense of completion. And always let them get to the final boss fight. Even if they don't get to the boss, let the boss get to them. So everybody wants the boss fight, right? And it requires a lot of skill as a DM, and it gets tense. You don't know any of the people at the table, so you're always trying to read them. You're trying to figure out how much do they know, what's their knowledge as a player, what's their skill as a player. Do they know the system? Have they ever played D&D before? Have they been playing for 50 years? You don't know, right? So you don't know what to throw at them. You got to make sure they're having fun all the time, right? You want to, if they're stacking dice or looking at their phone, they're not having fun. So you got to focus on the fun. And most of them, because that's what they paid for. They paid money to go to a convention. They're giving up the opportunity to play in, 10 or 20 other games to play in yours. And so, you want to make sure that they left feeling good about it. They didn't waste their 4 hours, right? But most important thing though is that even though they might guess you're changing things up on the fly as you go, never give them any proof of it. Never give them any evidence, or else it breaks that illusion that they beat the whole thing as written. Nobody wants to know that they, got the cheat codes handed to them, but didn't know they got the cheat codes handed to them. It takes a lot of practice, and it's the game I'm least used to running. I've only run a handful of convention games, and I've noticed after a 4-hour session, I'm freaking exhausted. You're always going to find me at the bar de-stressing from running a con game, basically. Right after the con game. In fact, I'm usually have a couple in before I start, and maybe a couple while I'm running it. But anyway, by the way, if you're at a convention that does not have a good bar, you went to the wrong damn convention, guys, all right? The fourth type is a long adventure. This is the type of thing that, it's going to take your players like 3 or more sessions to complete. Some of these can run a year or more. They're often confused as campaigns. But campaigns are not determined by length. While length does matter, as any woman will tell you, length is not determinative of whether it's a campaign or not. A campaign is all about the motion of the ocean. A long campaign it's probably the most popular thing that Wizards of the Coast sells, and they're shit. They're basically railroad campaigns disguised as adventures. They're written like novels with chapters, and there's a whole story and this and that. And it's expected that your players will do this, and then they're going to do that, and they'll appear and there, and eventually conclude the campaign, adventure, whatever you want to call it, the exact way the authors thought they would conclude it. No matter what happens, it's going to go this way. That's not a long adventure. That's a bullshit, shitty campaign, and it disguises as a long adventure. The thing I'm talking about for a long adventure is usually a self-contained thing, like a big dungeon or like a large forest, an old mine. And this thing has lots of nooks and crannies and interesting places to get into and explore and get into trouble in. The PCs go to a place, they kick ass, they take names, they take loot, they take magic, and then they leave without having affected much other than the area that they kicked ass in. In other words, it's not world spanning. It's not huge in scope. They can run for months, they can run for years. Some of the big megadungeons will take you freaking forever to kill you. Look at Rapanathek or something like that, or Barrowmaze. But Rapanathek alone, that could take you 30 years to beat, But they're not world spanning, and they don't usually need much of an area outside the adventure location and maybe a village or a city or whatever to buy and sell stuff in. And that's it. It's like a self-contained thing. So as opposed to campaigns, that's the next thing I'm going to talk about. They could be of any length, campaigns. The key determiner of what makes a campaign different from a long adventure is in the scope, as I alluded to before. It's not one adventure, no matter how long. It's a series of interconnected adventures in a living, breathing world. The size of the world that a campaign takes place in can vary. Like I ran a campaign that took an entire world, an entire planet, and I've run that one that took place within like a few hundred miles across by a few hundred miles across. The one that spanned the whole world took like 5 years to finish, and the regional little one took about 2 years to finish. We could have gone even further. Could have gone a couple more years. The world-spanning one took 5 years in our time and about 9 years in game time, where the regional one took 2 years in our time and only took 5 months in game time. So it's not that it's scope can vary. What really matters is in terms of time, but it really matters at a scope in terms of the area of effect of the campaign. Other than scope in terms of time, though, the other thing that makes it important and interesting to determine whether it's a campaign as opposed to a long adventure is that the world will breathe and grow and live and change just like the players do. Things are going to happen in the world that DM or GM would have to keep track of that aren't related to what the PCs are doing in any way. All the countries, the villages, the regions, the towns, things change in these places from time to time. And so you got to be like a historian. Just like our world changes, not related to what the hell we do every day from our day-to-day lives, the world the PCs are in is going to change. And the PCs will find out about these changes through various means. The bards come to town, the troubadours and travelers or whatever, other adventurers, and you hear about these things that are going on out there, and it gives it a living feeling to it, and it gives the place a sandbox feel too, where the players feel like they can go anywhere and do anything. The big thing about a campaign is that there's no predetermined middle or end to it. All you know is where it starts. What happens after that, the story of the PCs, what their characters do, it emerges from their actions intermingled with what's going on in the world. At that time and what part they want to play in it. They could choose to play no part in what's going on with the big war to the north or the famine to the east, whatever. They don't have to do anything, but they could do whatever the hell they want. And what they decide to do, that's how their story gets determined, and that's how the campaign develops from one adventure to another. All right, so I'm going to get into how to create campaigns in huge detail later on in this series and in the book. So we'll get into that a lot later. But I just want to give you an idea of what it is as opposed to like a long adventure here. The last type of game you might have to run it's like a subset of a campaign. This is the other thing Tim reminded me of. I've never done it. That's why it didn't even come to mind. It's called like a shared world or a round robin game. It's basically where everybody, even the GM, makes up characters, and some or all of the players take turns running everyone else's characters on adventures in a shared campaign world. So each GM runs an adventure. It usually lasts 2 or more sessions, and the adventures, they can be related or not. They don't have to be, right? So Bob runs an adventure, and then Sam runs the next one for last 2-3 sessions, and Sam runs the same one with the same characters as players in this game that he was adventuring with in a session before, right? So they don't have to be related at all in terms of connecting, but a lot of GMs like to make it like their adventure that they're going to run next or coming up sort of, segue off of or have a piece of the prior GM's adventures. That's kind of cool. They in other words, you beat the goblins here in this mine or whatever the hell, and then the next adventure run by the next guy is, all right, the goblins where they came from, they're all pissed, right? And they want to get vengeance upon the characters, and then they attack the town that the characters adventure from, and then they kidnap somebody, and the characters got to go rescue whoever or kick ass from the goblins from wherever they're at, and in their mountain fortress or something like that. Things like that. So they're interconnected if you want them to. They don't have to be, right? So I've never done one of these. I've never played in one either. But I know that Gygax, created D&D and whatnot. He used to do this. I think Rob Kuntz, he co-DM'd his Castle Greyhawk, so I know that for sure. So, and I think they used to take their players and bounce around from one DM's campaign world to another. So that's another way to do it, I guess. You're always going to inherit maybe players from other campaign worlds. So anyway, that's the basic type of games, guys. Hey, before I forget, like and subscribe if you like this thing, and share it around. I appreciate it. Helps to grow the channel. But I wanted to get into this section of it now and all the different games you can play. And next up, I'm going to get into the style as opposed to the type of games, the style of games that you could run as a GM. All right, but in the meantime, I'll have this dropped for you tomorrow. In the meantime, enjoy your night, and I will talk to you tomorrow with the next session of this. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.